The Biden administration recently approved $5.8 billion in student loan forgiveness for 323,000 disabled borrowers. So it got us thinking, is this type of student loan forgiveness automatic, and is it legal? Are there other scenarios in which student loan forgiveness is automatic? Let's unpack this topic in this video and see if it impacts you and your student loans. Hey guys, it's Justine with The College Investor, investing and personal finance for millennials. So automatic student loan forgiveness is kind of a big deal because it means that student loan borrowers don't have to fill out lengthy applications and forms. It's just automatically applied. Now, this isn't new news. In fact, the Biden administration and the U.S. Department of Education have kind of developed these automatic programs for various things. Now, the Biden administration has to date forgiven $8.7 billion in student loans that has impacted more than 400,000 student loan borrowers. That is kind of crazy to think about. So let's take a look at what actions have already happened for student loan forgiveness. So due to the pandemic, we have seen administrative forbearance on federal student loans happen. Administrative forbearance simply means that all interest has been paused and payments have been frozen. So you are not required to make any payments. Now that has been extended as of January 21st, 2021. That was extended to September 30th of 2021, which impacted 36 million borrowers. The next thing that took place in March, a couple things actually took place in March, was the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which makes student loan forgiveness tax-free through December 31st of 2025. So any forgiveness amount that was reported on your tax return as income, which definitely affects the amount of taxes that you pay, is now waived through 2025. Then in March, there was the rescinded partial relief formula for borrower defense to repayment discharges, providing full relief. Big mouthful. Also restored total permanent disability discharges for borrowers whose loans were reinstated due to a failure to file earnings paperwork during the pandemic. So both of these types of forgiveness programs were over $1 billion, and it affected thousands of borrowers. Then at the end of March, the expanded payment pause and interest rate waiver, who were in default, affected 1 million borrowers. And then in June, we saw a borrower defense to repayment of $1.5 billion that affected 92,000 borrowers. Now, the big one here that a lot of people were impacted by was an extension, again, of the payment pause and interest waiver, which has now been extended to January 31st of 2022. And then in August, we saw another wave of forgiveness, including total and permanent disability discharge, interest waiver for members of the U.S. Armed Forces, and closed school discharges. All right, so several of these programs that have student loan forgiveness attached to them were automatically taken care of, such as the disability discharges. So anybody who had filed disability status through Social Security, they were able to data match that up with their student loans. Therefore, there was no application required on the borrower's behalf. Same thing with that interest waiver for U.S. service members. So because they have that data already in the system, then Department of Education could take a look at that and just automatically apply it. Plus, the big one that affects probably most of you who are watching this video is that interest and payment pause and waiver system that has been in place due to the pandemic. So if you had federal student loans through the Department of Education, they are going to go through their data matching records and then match that up and do the automatic pause for you. However, if you are affected by any of these programs, either you're a service member, you have filed for disability or you know you have federal student loans, you'll want to make sure that these things, the waivers and payment pauses, have already been applied to your account. One thing to note about public service loan forgiveness, if you are working on applying for that, which is you make 120 qualifying payments along with that eligibility status for public service loan forgiveness, even though you're not required to make payments and maybe you haven't been making payments, those months that you are in this forbearance period still count towards that 120 qualifying payments for public service loan forgiveness. So that's kind of cool because you haven't had to put in any money, but you are still headed towards qualifying for that type of program. Some other actions that they've taken in order to make this a little bit more streamlined is that there is a negotiated rulemaking committee that takes a look at regulatory changes. This is coming out of the Department of Education to make sure everything is streamlined. And also colleges have access to a relief fund in which they can go ahead and forgive any amounts owed to them from their students. Now, to be clear, broad action of student loan forgiveness has to be authorized by Congress. A lot of people get mistaken that the president can just go ahead and implement executive order and executive action on that, but there has to be authorization from Congress first. So that brings us to the question, is student loan forgiveness, automatic student loan forgiveness, legal? And the short answer is yes, because a lot of these programs are already in place. Now, statutory language is going to make this a little bit more challenging, but if members of Congress can kind of rifle through the fine language, even changing small words from shall to may or vice versa can really impact how these documents are interpreted. So it sounds like the Biden administration and Congress are really trying to streamline this type of student loan forgiveness with language that's put in place, with programs that are put in place to make it easier for borrowers to gain access to student loan forgiveness. And when I'm thinking about student loan forgiveness in terms of death and disability discharges, I mean, as someone who would have to take care of that for a loved one, if the possibility of this being automatic, that could save so much grief and headache to have to take care of that for someone else. Now, I think the U.S. Department of Education is going to find ways to make this more streamlined, especially with the use of data matching. And now we have the technology to do so and make that a reality. I think we're going to see these types of actions happen a lot faster. But now is not a time to bank on any of these methods. While we're still hopeful that things like the $10,000 broad student loan forgiveness by the Biden administration is going to happen, we're still waiting on that. So you have to have a plan in place for how you're going to pay off your student loans. So don't forget, we have hundreds of free resources, blog posts, articles, everything in between to help you pay off your student loan debt as quickly as possible so you can get back to building wealth. Be sure to check out all of our free resources at thecollegeinvestor.com.